Hi. So in this video I'm going to be running through a seated shoulder internal rotation dynamic isometric using a support for my arm. So I'm using a bench, but you could also do the same thing using a wall for this. I'm using the bench simply because it allows me to play a lot more with variables. I also feel quite comfortable in this setup, and because due to the nature of the exercise is generally quite a long set, a lot of time under tension, being comfortable, being able to move is quite important for me. So you want to think with this exercise before we start, you could almost treat it like one slow eccentric, which is what I'm going to demo, but this within the set could also be 1 to 3 reps, for example. So for the internal rotation, this would be my starting point outside of end range, but I want to finish here, which is the end of internal rotation for me. So I'm not able to actively go past this point, maybe just a bit more passively, which I can also work into. Now, if this is going to be a slow rep, and I'm also thinking with the exercise to work outside of this common movement pattern, I'm then thinking about applying all movement variables possible with nearby joints. So things to think about: opening and closing the elbow throughout the movement, elbow rotation, what you're doing with the wrist, maybe flexing it, maybe having it straight, even opening the hand. Other things to think about is turning your upper body towards this elbow, closing this front angle, maybe turning away. All of these things will change again how the shoulder joint is being challenged for this particular exercise. So I will demo a rep to give you an idea of how I'm using this exercise with all the variables. I'll start here. This hand goes over now. I'm going to constantly hold a resistance of externally rotating, but then with my other arm, I'm going to be pulling the arm down. And it's going to be very slow, this battle, that this arm wins. So here, hand over. I begin to externally rotate. Then the other arm is starting to win the battle. Now I've only gone a few degrees forwards, but now I'm going to start to change things. I'm starting with rotating the elbow. And I'm doing this actively from this particular elbow. I'm not manipulating it passively with my hand. I can play then with closing the elbow a bit more, opening it. I can then think about opening and closing the elbow whilst rotating the elbow, or even just having the elbow bias in a alternate rotation. I can start to think about turning my upper body and rotating around. And as I do that, what I'm trying to do is open up the back of the shoulder, the space between my arm and my shoulder blade. And as you notice, I'm starting to go a little lower now with the exercise. I'm also starting to fatigue as I'm exploring all these areas. I'm always thinking about externally rotating, constantly keeping this active. And if you notice, I'm also moving very slow. The reason I'm moving very slow is I'm applying quite a lot of force throughout the movement. There's a lot of resistance, and it changes quite a lot in terms of what is being challenged, stressed on my shoulder joint. I'm also trying to assess how much I can tolerate, not overstress the joint either. And now I'm going towards my end. That may have been a set just of 1 rep, but if it was a second rep I was going to go for within the set, I would just reset, hand back over, and then repeat for the prescribed time. So there's a lot you can play with. Even with this leg, you don't have to have it here. You could have it out to the side. You can play with doing this on a box, against a wall. The idea is simply, as you're simply working through this slow eccentric, try to manipulate other nearby joints at the same time as you're working through the movement.